I am letting go. I come to hold me. I need the confidence in me to actualize.
Hello and welcome, we're the Aussie Guys. I'm AJ, here with me is G. How are you, G?
Very well, AJ. Looking forward to tonight, actually.
Yeah, so we're in the back half and quite deliberately actually left some really good guests till close to the end.
Well, that's basically because they didn't want to come on
No,
straight away.
that's not true.
No?
That's not true at all.
Maybe off gallivanting, other countries.
Well, no, that is true, yes. So we have Dana O'Gorman now. She's our Seattle Seahawks expert, and we love to chat to her. And it could be, Dana, what is it, three years in a row?
I think this is my third year. Yeah,
I
was
it
thinking
is.
about that the other day. I think it's 3.
Fantastic.
This is a long-term relationship.
It
Outside of my marriage, this is probably the longest I've had.
At this point, we probably need to buy furniture. I'm pretty sure. So,
That's right.
About time I gave you a key to the house.
all right.
And a drawer. That's right.
Very good.
Dana, Senior Sports Director for Our Turf Football and you're host of the Our Turf podcast. You're a writer and you're involved in the management for MLSfemale.com. Obviously a big Seahawks fan. Hey, listen, tell us about Our Turf Football, because this is something that's new. You didn't have that gig, that didn't exist last time we spoke to you.
Right. We were in the process of it last year because we started right at the beginning of September. So Our Turf Football is what has become what NFL Female used to be. So we were in a group together for a long, long time called NFL Female, and the owner of NFL Female needed to step back. And so a group of us writers that had written for her for years and years took over. We bought the name from her and we kind of switched things around. So it's the same group of great female NFL writers, just under a new name and umbrella. So that is now Our Turf Football. And we are a site that is dedicated to the female NFL fan, the female NFL writer, and giving, props and to the female aspect of football, which we don't get to see on the field, except for now in coaching, which is very exciting, and in refereeing, but to kind of give a voice to those female writers. And this, believe it or not, is our 7th year that we have been around. I know it's crazy. We're right there with Russell Wilson. We're in year 7 with Russell Wilson here now. But yeah, and so it's Our Turf has really grown and expanded, and now we're in press boxes and we're on the sidelines with the teams, and it's been a really fun journey, and we're really excited to see it grow even more this year.
Oh, that's fantastic. And certainly, look, we've had a few people from previously from NFL Female on our pod. The content that comes out of, or previously, the artist previously known as NFLfemale.com.
That's right. That's right.
Has just been top notch. Just fantastic stuff. And, that was initially where we kind of sourced your good self as well. So. It's a great bunch. I encourage everyone to go check out OurTurfFB.com. It's great. Perfect. So listen, Dana, let's talk Seahawks. And
let's do it.
Yeah, and might start with 2017. So, this might hurt a little bit. You'll be ducking and weaving and running like Russell Wilson did for 16 games. So the 2017 season ended with a Blair Walsh missed field goal. Sorry to mention it.
Yeah, it's all right.
That would have given you the game over the Cardinals. But to be honest, you had already been eliminated from the playoffs for the first time in 6 years too. A 9-7 record and a second place finish in the NFC West, which all of a sudden, Dana, has become good. It's become really competitive.
Right.
Yeah. After a season, which, you can tell us your thoughts, but I was thinking, how could I sum up the Seahawks season? I think poor play out of the backfield from the running core and bad O-line play. I mean, Russell Wilson, he actually became the first NFL quarterback in 27 seasons to lead his team in rushing, which is an interesting stat because it kind of belies both of those things, the poor running back play and also the fact he ran for his life.
Once again, you are taking questions out of my mouth.
I'm sorry.
Gentlemen. Yeah, you let me tell you this. The 2017, there's one word that sums that up for Seattle and their fans, and it's frustrating. And that's the whole season was, it was just frustrating. So there was absolutely no running game in any way, shape, or form. We could not keep a running back healthy for longer than like 2 quarters at a time. Like we would finally get one back from injury, and then 2 quarters later, they're back off with an injury. It was just a revolving door that no one could seem to stop. And so that completely threw off the rest of the entire Seahawks game, because that's what they were based on. That's what they loved. And they had been struggling with it for a couple of years. And then you have Russell Wilson, who, if last season does not show how much of a top-tier quarterback he is, I don't know what people want from him anymore, because he was the entire offense. The entire offense came out of Russell Wilson and his legs and his circus style of quarterback. And the only reason Russell Wilson plays the way he does, because there's lots of purists out there who say, oh, he needs to run from the pocket or stay in the pocket more. He needs to not run so much. He has no choice. And yet at the same time, still manages to make a play or two. The fact that after we lost so many people to injury, the injury list for the Seahawks, everyone focused on, Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Cliff Averill, because for a lot of people outside of Seattle, they think our entire team is just about 5 players. The injury list was actually, at one point, it had 30-some names on it, because the whole entire team was just so beat up and such a disaster. And then in the same, conversation, the Seahawks are still in the mix of everything, except for thanks to Blair Walsh. Minnesota fans tried to warn us, and we should have listened. And someone should have said, Pete Carroll, have you talked to the coaches at Minnesota? But he didn't. He was convinced that Blair Walsh could do the way, could be the guy he used to be. And there were 3 games that he literally, you can go back and watch it, lost for the Seahawks. 3 games, which then would have put us at an 11-win season. Frustrating.
Wow. And yeah, a very, very frustrating season. And it's kind of interesting to reflect on the fact that we're in training camp at the moment. And you're right, Russell Wilson he's a top tier. He's an elite quarterback. He's that status now, and I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's minds. He is up there. Mm-hmm. But it's funny to reflect on, you said 7 years of Russell Wilson. It's funny to reflect on his training camp journey, because the name escapes me, and I'm sure you'll be able to tell me, but that year when Russell Wilson was a rookie and they had just forked out for that Green Bay...
it was Matt. Yeah, it was Matt Flynn.
Matt Flynn, that's the one.
Yeah.
I was just thinking how Matt Flynn was sort of almost penciled in as the starter, and Russell was there and beat him out in training camp, essentially. So... Yeah, so training camp can be really, really revealing, and certainly this off-season has seen sweeping change, but it's probably been justified and needed. Pete Carroll, I don't know what you can tell me how you feel about Pete Carroll, but he doesn't give a lot away. Like, I find him almost a bit frustrating with what he says, because he said, I've got a quote here, "We didn't like the way it went, and we wanted to do something about it. You're seeing the result of that." And he's referring to the fact that almost everyone on his staff was fired. 6 new assistants were brought in, including a new DC and OC. And obviously there's been a massive amount of ins and outs through free agency as well. So we're seeing a real sort of different Seahawks team in the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I love Pete Carroll, and I'm a complete homer when it comes to Pete Carroll. So I have no qualms about singing his praises, and I know he's done things wrong, and I know he doesn't always do things perfectly, but I don't care. So, but he can be a little frustrating. He does take that out of the Bill Belichick playbook of give just enough of a nugget for the press to talk about and keep everything else, kind of tight-lipped. Yeah. So he is very good at that. You're right. We have a new OC, Brian Schottenheimer, which was not received great by the Seahawks fan. Brian does not have the best track record, but apparently Pete once again put his faith in it. But they were thrilled about the new defensive coordinator, Ken Norton Jr., because he had been on the staff before. He was on the Super Bowl staff. He was the linebackers coach for Seattle for a long time. He knows what kind of football they like to play. So when he was hired, the fans were overjoyed, and so were the players. They were so happy to get him back. And then the Raiders players, we have quite a few players that play for Oakland Raiders now. So Bruce Irvin and was horrified that he was losing his coach and that he was back in Seattle. So it was a little hard between the two, not being happy about the OC, but being thrilled about the DC. But I think it was needed. Everyone was so over Tom Cable at that point. He had to go. And, we've been hearing about firing the OC for years. And so it was a good shakeup that was needed. The shakeup, though, that I'm sure that we will talk about, though, that was a little harder to take was in some of the players that came and that was definitely a lot harder for fans. But now, a few months removed from the heartache of me losing my favorite football player, Darren Richard Sherman, it was absolutely necessary and time. It absolutely was time.
Yeah, let me mention a few names and I'll reel them out. This is not even an exhaustive list, but the Legion of Boom is well and truly gone now. It may have been hanging on by its fingertips, perhaps, in 2017, but now it's gone. So Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett, Jimmy Graham, Cam Chancellor and Cliff Averill, as you said, the sort of medical retirements as opposed to just being let go or traded or anything. Thomas Rawls, probably no big loss. Luke Wilson, Paul Richardson. And in the building, we've got a bit of a mix of players, and it's probably more, let's say, sort of, I would say bargain basement shopping, sort of more value perhaps than big names. So we've got Tom Johnson, D-tackle from the Vikings. We've got Barkevius Mingo, defensive end edge guy from the Colts. We've got Brandon Marshall. Sebastian Janikowski comes in, obviously for Blair Walsh. Quarterback.
Is that an improvement? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
No.
Dante Johnson from the Niners. DJ Fluker, who's an O-lineman, Maurice Alexander, a safety, and Jerron Brown also came in. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but they're kind of, I don't know, they're contributors, and they've got, there's ways in which all of those guys can probably add to depth or contribute. But what's your feeling about, it's hard, I know. There's some big names that have gone out the building. It
was hard. Well, the Legion of Boom really was the focal point of that super powerful winning Seahawks team. And the fans, they were as important to us as Tom Brady is the Patriots. The Legion of Boom was that important to the fans. And we adored them, and they were cocky and obnoxious, and that's what we loved about them. Now we don't enjoy that part of them so much because they're doing that for other teams. But at the same time, that was really hard. But we have to keep in mind that injuries had been starting to mount with them. And do I still think they could all still play? Yes. But, except for poor Cam. And you're right. Cam and Cliff Averill are two very different conversations. And I'm so glad they took their health into importance and stopped playing. But as for the other guys, though, it was really time. There was something, and you could feel it as a fan, that something going on in the defense last year. There was just this constant grumbling going on that they just was not clicking, and they weren't happy. And I think what started happening is that the offense started getting a little of the attention that the defense was used to getting. Plus, they were exhausted from trying to make up for that horrid offensive line and no run game. And so there was just animosity going on there. So I think for sure there needed to be some cleaning out in the defense. It was very interesting. Paul Richardson, who I will miss. I'm real sad that he did not stay with Seattle. I really like Paul Richardson, and it took him years to get healthy, but he's a great player, and he was playing very well for us last year. Washington fans should be very happy to have him. But he said an interesting quote when he was being interviewed during this training camp in Washington, that when he left Seattle, he was tired of the fighting and being blamed for everything. And I think that the offense was blamed for everything. And I think that that's what you could feel in the team, was just that animosity between the defense and the offense. Plus, we have to remember, like I said, all those injuries started to mount up. Luke Wilson is another one I was really hoping Seattle could figure out a way to hold on to. He was really going to be the replacement for Jimmy Graham, and he was super fun. He's a great kid. Lions fans are going to love him. the loss of Jimmy Graham is not as great for me. Everyone remembers, his great touchdowns. They don't remember the 15 times he dropped the ball in between. He could not hold on to that ball, and he just never fit really into the Seahawks. We loved him. We really thought last year was going to be his year to really get over that injury and start playing well. Just didn't quite ever happen. And so then you looked at the guys that are coming in now, and you are absolutely right. These aren't guys that are meant to be superstars. These are guys to give us depth, to give us some glue back to this team a little bit. I think the addition of Brandon Marshall was brilliant. And it's not that he's going to come on and all of a sudden become the superstar of the wide receiving core. That's not his place. That's not his job. He's going to be a specialist. He's going to come in specific situations, and he will excel at that because he does have this injury history. They're going to limit what he does, but I think he'll do well in that role. Plus, so far, he's already been a pretty good mentor for some of these younger guys, and he does all kinds of great things with them. So I think that was his job. Some of the other additions, I'm excited about Brown coming in as a wide receiver. I love it. He said flat out in an interview, he hated Seattle before he showed up there. He didn't want anything to do with them. He hated the team. He hated the coach. And then he was picked up by Seattle, and it took him a minute, and now he's really happy. He sees where some of that annoying, chip on the shoulder stuff comes from. So that's real good. I think it'll be good. But it's more along the line. Extending Dwayne Brown, picking him up midway through the season last year, and then extending him, that was the number one key to that offensive line. I think that was huge. And then to add DJ Fluker, who they seem really impressed with. He's working, he also has a bit of an injury history. I know that Giants fans weren't thrilled with him, but Mike Scolari came to Seattle also. And so from the Giants. And so he already knows DJ. DJ and he were together last year. And so they really feel like they can bring him along, and they've been real happy. I mean, the guy's 355 pounds. He could be an immovable force. And that seems to be what's happening during training camp. So some good, solid additions. Tom is a big one too. They've talked a lot about him. So I think it'll be good, along with all these new great running backs that I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, so it'll be good. Yeah, I like the depth they've brought in. No superstars, no Des Bryant. Thank God. I don't want Des Bryant anywhere near Seattle. But we have some nice, good depth now.
Do I like about that? There's no rose-tinted glasses at all.
Are you being sarcastic?
That was a little bit of sarcasm thrown in there, yes.
Okay, now, I don't know how I'm going to mention these draft picks, G, without spoiling all your thunder, because, look, G's going to ask...
I just ask everybody, just say, good draft.
Okay, without discussing the players too much, because we will
go through
discuss them, my feeling as an outsider, I had mixed feelings. Like, I reckon there's some players in the draft class that are fantastic. Yep. But it's probably the first round pick. That's probably the most contentious one, to be honest. Rashad Penny. So, what were your feelings when the pick dropped? Was it unexpected? What was the reaction from Seattle fans?
People it was a bit of a mixed reaction from the fans, to be honest with you. But it really depended on what news organization you read about him. Because, to be honest with you, there were ones that said he should have been the first the first pick after Saquon Barkley, and then others who were like, why didn't he get picked before the fifth round? It was so up and down about him, the news, and you watch his play, and he won all these awards and stuff in college, and he looked really good. And then other people are like, oh, but there's this, that, and the other. It was so hard to get a good grip on this kid at all. I will tell you that by the time rookie minicamp came around, people were pretty happy about it. They were pretty happy that they had gone after this kid who, when he runs, he looks a little like Marshawn. And so they were like, oh, that looks familiar to me. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was an Adrian Peterson runner. He was more of that kind of downhill runner. So people were happy. As we're getting into training camp, though, and we'll talk about these running backs, I'm sure, the resurgence of Chris Carson has completely changed the conversation about him. And so he still is doing well, but he looks like a rookie. And I think people were hoping he'd be a little more NFL ready. But yeah, but you're right. This draft was a little hard. It was a little strange. The first three picks, they went, running back, defensive end, which Rasheem Green is doing wonderfully in camp, let me say. And then tight end. And it's like, wait, but the O-line, but the line. they didn't pick anyone for the line until round 5. So, it was like, what are they doing? But so far it's been okay. I would give this draft like a B-. Let's just put it that way. We'll see. I mean, you never know till the second year, but let's see. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was interested to hear about Rasheem Green because I didn't know a whole lot about him pre-draft. Will Disley, look, G is a big fan of Will Disley, and you can get into the tight end class in a minute. And Shaquem Griffin, I mean, everybody in the NFL loved that pick. What a brilliant pick.
Yeah. And unfortunately, some sarcastic, salty, probably 49er or Rams fans were not very. They call him, he's your PR pick. Well, if you think he was a PR pick, you've never watched him play, because his twin brother plays on our team, and yes, he only has one hand, but the kid can play football, and he has done what in the scrimmage game he picked off Russell Wilson. He's a one-handed football player, and he picked off Russell Wilson. So what do you know what I mean? He can play football. Will he be able? He's kind of little for our linebackers. If you've seen Poppy Wagner and KJ Wright, they're huge humans. But at the same time, he will be great in special situations and on special teams. He is not the PR pick that some people say. He's quite the football player, and the attitude that he brings. God, Seattle needed that good attitude really badly.
I was going to say, we started doing our quarterbacks, running backs, special wide receivers and looking ahead for the guys going to be in the draft this year. And so I was looking at one of the quarterbacks, and they came up against Griffin in one of the and I thought it was actually a highlight reel for him. The amount of times he got to the quarterback was, I watched him, I didn't really notice it, but all of a sudden his name kept popping up. I'm thinking, he's got some serious speed about him. And if you use him like as a blitzing linebacker, mate, he's going to get to the quarterback all the time.
Yep. And, and that's where I think they're going to work on putting a little weight on him just to, make sure that, he can, once he gets there, he can bring him down. But at the same time, he's got a special skill set. And so, that was my favorite moment of the entire draft. And it was so great. And it's so great to hear them interviewed together and talk about, that, now they live together in the same apartment. They got a dog. Like, they're just twin brothers. They're just glued to the hip. And the fact that Seattle, helped continue that, the boys are going to play better together. And I think Seattle knew that because they're both so good apart. How good can they be when they have each other's support system? So I think it's going to be great to watch.
Okay, so let's start talking about some of those skill positions, and we always start off with the quarterback, obviously. So Russell Wilson, last season, as you said, he was the offense. He scored 34 touchdowns in total, 4,000 passes, almost 4,000, 17 yards short, which is incredible. Seeing he was, like Adrian said, ducking, weaving, bobbing, doing it all, and only one of the TDs scored on offense did not actually go through him, which is just absolutely it's incredible. Isn't it incredible when you think of that? I don't think that would have never happened. I didn't even look this up. It couldn't have happened.
Has that ever happened?
I don't think it could have.
Yeah,
surely not.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then when these media people come out with their quarterback lists and he's like 7th down on the list, I'm like, did you watch last year? I get so irritated. Oh.
And we got Doug Baldwin sitting on the sideline, obviously with his knee. And we'll talk about the wide receivers, but he reckons this is, from what he's seen in camp, this is the best that he's ever seen of Russell Wilson in camp. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. So thank God I have him on a few of my fantasy team, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Hold on to them. That's right.
So you have new receivers come in the building, some receivers leave, you got a tight end that we'll talk about, but with and we got to talk about the line, obviously, but what are the expectations on Russell Wilson on this year?
I think much of the same, without the fans having to constantly hold their breath to see if he's going to break his leg because someone got through the line again. Like literally, it was exhausting to be panicked all the time about Russell Wilson because the line was just so bad last year. So I think the expectation this year is that they'll run the ball a lot more. And from what we're seeing in practice and the things that are being said and reported, they are heavy trying to go back to that run. They're trying to save their quarterback. They don't want him, hurt, but they also don't want him burned out in 2 more years. They want him to have this nice long career. Pocket passer quarterbacks are the ones that last the longest in the league. So because they're not hit as much. And so I think that that's really what they're looking for, is to take some of that pressure off of Russell, give him the time to do some of the things that he would prefer to do instead of the, 20-yard circus throws that he had to do last year, and to actually let him focus more on his games. Interesting that you brought up Doug Baldwin's interview about Russell, and really that Schottenheimer is really pushing him on some things that probably was let go by the prior OC. They, because he was so good, they let him do his thing. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. And from what we're being told and what we see, Schottenheimer is very vocal on the field, on the practice field. He is there. He is in Russell Wilson's ear all the time. They spend a lot of time together. And, he gives him this list of things to do and to work on. And you know what? Russell Wilson, being the guy that he is, he's going to take that and run with it.
Just behind it, we don't usually talk about the backup quarterbacks, but just a guy that I was interested in that you took in the 7th, and that's Alex Magoo. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yeah.
Now, look, he's really struggled in camp. He looked okay in minicamp and the OTAs and all that, but he's really starting to struggle a little bit. And look, and even Pete Carroll, he's a long-term project. Like, he's going to be a hell of a long-term. Russell Wilson's a young guy. He's going to be there for a long time.
Right.
But what do you see in him?
I think rough. He's just rough, for lack of a better term. He's got a lot of edge smoothing that needs to be done. I think they'll keep him on the practice squad. They do seem to think that he's got the potential there. At the same time, he won't be seeing an NFL field for a while. I think that he's got definitely some grooming and that needs to be done. But it's so weird because Pete sees things in people and they hold on to him for dear life, even when the fans or the media think that they should let them go, and they're like, no, there's something there. Jermaine Ifedi is the perfect example of that. But so I think that, they'll hold on to that. But Austin Davis, I think, is the one who will truly be the backup. He will be there with Russell Wilson. Now, does that make me feel a ton better? Not really. But, at least he's had one snap in the NFL.
I'm shaking my head with you.
That's better. Yeah. I think that, they're so used to Russell Wilson being so resilient, and they bank on that. They count on that, which I guess is a good thing. But yeah, so I think it'll be obviously Austin Davis will be the backup, but Alex he'll be around. They'll see what they can get out of him.
Okay, I might have to drop in onto my what's the list you have for your rookie guys on your fantasy team? You got that
Taxi
squad. Yeah, you might be sitting there for a few years. All right, so let's go to the RBs and let's go back and have a look at the 2017 class. I just went through them all here. We had Eddie Lacy, 9 games, too fat, too slow, too injured. Mike Davis, 6 games injured. Thomas Rawls, 12 games injured. Chris Carson, 4 games injured. CJ Pro size 5 games. Sorry, 5 games injured.
No.
And then there's JD McKissick, who someone eventually had to carry the ball at some stage. So it sort of reminded me of the Mike Myers Austin Powers movie, the one where he's sitting down when he realises that he's like 30 years on, and all the people that he used to know, like Janis Joplin and all these people, and he starts crossing them off the list. That's what the running back started to look like, wasn't it? So as you said, he's topped the categories in rushing with yardage, attempts, TDs, average yards per attempt. Okay, so we're going to fast forward now to 2018. We spoke about your first-round draft pick, Rashad Penny. And look, I'm no scout, but we like to do it every year and believe that we are in some form of life. I probably had him maybe around number 6 or 7 of the guys coming out, and that really means absolutely nothing. And I don't think AJ was a massive. He's shaking his head as well, so that's probably two no's. No rose-tinted glasses on here. So just explain the whole thought process of going out and grabbing Rashad Penny. And as you said, Chris Carson is absolutely burning it up in camp. So do you start to look at that? Like, we saw what Chris Carson was last year in the very glimpse that we had, the 4 games that we saw him in.
Well, he was the guy.
We saw the best back that you had that year.
Okay, let me say this first about the running backs. It was a comedy by the end of the season. Literally, there would be bets being taken on how long they would manage to stay on the field. it was just awful. But at the same time, people wonder why we didn't have a running game. Geez, I wonder why. That's why we didn't have a running game. Here's the thing, Rashad Penny. I don't think he's going to become the featured back unless something massively changes. If he blows up in preseason, heck yeah, they're going to put him out there. He'll be a 3-down back. You know what I mean? But I think that Chris Carson is finally showing what we knew he had. But there's a lack of trust there from all of us. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because no one believes that any of them can stay on the field. CJ Prosise, he had some great moments when he was on the field. But I do think this. I think that Chris Carson's going to end up being our premier back. I think he is going to take that and run with it. I think that CJ Prosise will have a big role there too. If that happens, I think Rashad Penny will be slid down, maybe that 3rd down back. He's very good at catching the ball out of the backfield, and so that might become his specialty. I'm not really sure. But I think that from what we're seeing, the run game will have a resurgence with the. I don't know how it couldn't. It can't get any worse.
No, it can't.
At this point. It has to have some sort of resurgence. But I do think that as impressive as Chris Carson has been, and Pete Carroll cannot quit singing his praises. Like, he talks about him constantly. I think that if they can stay on the field, our run game will be better than average. This is not Marshawn Lynch we're talking about, people. That was an anomaly. He's a once in a 25-year player. So there's no replacing him. But if we can just get a little bit of a run game, I think that will help the entire offense. And of course, logically, it's going to help the offense, but it's going to help the wide receivers. Everyone talks about our wide receiving core and how not spectacular it is. But if we can do more with the run game, that obviously then helps the passing game too.
Well, that's a big investment, though, isn't it? First-round pick, and especially this year with the running back depth being so as deep as it was. It's just like you could have got someone. Look, I'll just say Nick Chubb. Hard-running, sort of physical back. If that's what you're looking for, you could have picked him up, 2 rounds later and fixed some other holes that were probably a little bit more glaring.
Yeah, you're not going to get an argument out of me. There was a lot of people that didn't want to take a running back first, and yet they knew that was the most. That was the area that most people were putting their focus on because the run game was so bad, and so I don't know if they just jumped. Once again, it is impossible to understand the logic of Pete Carroll and John Snyder. Mm-hmm. They picked Bruce Irvin in the first round, and everyone's heads exploded. You know what I mean? But it's what they see. I was happy about that pick, but I was the only one. But they see something. They see how they can fit into a system, and they pick a guy because of that, not necessarily because of his stats. The last few years, that has not worked out in their favor. The drafts have not been that great. But at the same time, we have a tendency to try and trust the logic. I don't know about this one. I think that he being able to catch out of the backfield is a big part of why they wanted him. But at the same time, I don't know if they knew that Carson and Prosise and Davis and McKissick would be better this year. I don't know. But all we can do at this point is kind of cross our fingers and hope that he works out, or he shocks, everyone and becomes this huge, fantastic running back.
Well, you need him to. First round pick.
Oh my God, I know.
Quietly. Okay, so let's go to the wide receivers and.
Okay.
I know it's a bit like when I started the running backs. I start with a side before I start, but look at a glance. You look at this receiving core, and you can't say this is. Outside of a couple of guys, can you see these guys taking you into a playoff spot? But we'll just go through them. Paul Richardson, who AJ was a big fan of coming out.
I love Paul Richardson.
Yeah, he has been. He leaves, so he's off to the nation's capital, and in his locker room, he leaves a little present of 80 targets, 703 yards with 6 touchdowns. In through the door to replace him is, someone that was once good in a galaxy far, far away and a time long ago. That's sort of tongue-in-cheek because 2015, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns with the Jets. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. God, you'd like a little bit of that, wouldn't you, in Seattle this year? But look, he's a massive target, isn't he? He's 6'5", 232 pounds. He knows how to play the position. As you said, John Brown from the Cardinals comes in. And look, he's showing flashes, especially with his namesake sort of in John Brown's never on the field if he's got a ingrown toenail or something. And then you've got the other guys. You've got the mainstays. You've got Doug Baldwin. We don't really need to talk about him. Outside of the fact of his knee issue, now, he has fluid on the knee, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
that's what they're saying.
I'm not a surgeon, but I always thought having fluid on the knee, when I had a knee surgery myself and this happened to me, is a result of something else. So at the moment, I haven't heard any more outside of the fact that he has fluid on the knee, but that's usually a cause of another problem.
Like infection or something, yeah.
Have you heard anything?
No. Once again, the Pete Carroll tight lip situation. So, no, he really has just kept saying he will be ready for the season. They're just being very careful with him because they need him, and that really it's not a big deal. And then the last time he was out on the field in practice, he didn't even have a brace on it. So I think that really it's probably not a huge deal. It's something that they would play through. It'd be a big deal to the average person, but not to an NFL player. And so we'll see. We'll see how it is. There really doesn't seem to be, with the media guys that have talked to him and Pete Carroll's interviews and that, there doesn't seem to be a ton of concern about it. They really think that he'll be just fine. So, God, I hope so.
Yes, because behind him you have Tyler Lockett, obviously, and we've seen what Tyler Lockett can do, just that speed, and even in the return game, he's outstanding. Now you've got your third round pick last year from Amari Darboh, and people say it's about time that he has to take the next step to help this team. So, look, there's a bunch of other guys behind them. The question is, like, where is Wilson going to be looking to? Who's he going to lock on? And when he squeezes the trigger, where's the ball going to go?
Right. Well, it's going to go to Doug Baldwin. The two of them have a synergy that is just amazing between the two of them. And everyone knows that. People who pay attention to football know how good Doug Baldwin is. People who are a casual fan have no idea his name. But people who know, they know the things that Doug Baldwin can do. And so, I really think that he, of course, will be our number one wide receiver. He's going to be the focus of a lot of those passes. Tyler Lockett is more of the question mark this year, to be quite honest with you. He was injured 2 years ago. Last year was his season back. And a lot of people were underwhelmed with what he did. And I wasn't. I was just, he had a really bad injury the year before, toward the end of the year, and he came back from it.
Tyler Lockett, broken leg.
He broke his leg. He is a little guy. He's not a Brandon Marshall. He's not your big-bodied receiver. He is a little guy. That's why he is so good at the kickoff returns, because he's so slippery. And last year, there was not a lot of opportunities for him to go get those footballs because of how bad that offensive line was. And so it was a weird year last year. Tyler Lockett has taken all of that criticism very personally. If you watch his interviews, if you follow him on social media, he has been very irritated by the fact you ask him, he thinks he had a great year last year of coming back after that injury, and he doesn't understand why people were, who think that he had this terrible year, because he really didn't have that bad of a year. But I think this year's going to be big for him. They're going to make there'll be some offensive, plays that are made specifically for him. I think that the return game with the new rules, look out. I don't know when the NFL came out with those new rules where they can't have the run-ups, and I know they're trying to, save the injuries and that sort of thing. That opens the door for Tyler Lockett huge. It's like, here, give me even more space to run, So I think that that'll be a big year for him with the special teams. But I think that he'll go back to more of the receiver that we kind of expected him to be. Like I mentioned already, I think Brandon Marshall is going to be a specialist. I think he's brought in truly almost as a replacement for Jimmy Graham, of that tall, big-bodied receiver. And in special situations, I don't think, unfortunately, that he'll have a repeat of the 2015 year. I would love that, but I don't think that will quite happen. But I think that he will make an impact. I think that he will have, some sort of impact. Will he get, I think it was 8 or 10 touchdowns that Jimmy Graham got last year? I don't know that. But if he gets 5, I'll take it. That'll be all right. So the rest of the guys, you start to run out of things to talk about. We have Brown that we brought in from Arizona. I think that he'll be good. I think that he's impressed people in practice so far. But then you get to Darboh, and you're right. People are saying, he has these flashes of brilliance, and then not so much. So it's really time for him to kind of make that transition, to make that big jump. And maybe this will be the year to do it. Maybe with a little more consistency at the line, a little more consistency in the run game, they'll be able to kind of do that. I don't know. I get why people are concerned about the wide receiving core in Seattle. It's obvious to look at it. At the same time, there is some talent there. So we're just going to see how that can be brought out with the new OC.
So they didn't include anybody, or they didn't draft anybody in the wide receiver, but they did draft a tight end, as you said, in the third round, in Will Disley. Now, I'm a bit of a fan, but I'm also a fan. I'm talking through fantasy football here, which we shouldn't be doing, but I'm going to do it anyway because you get a guy because of opportunity. Now, he comes out of Washington, and already Wilson is highly impressed of what he's done in camp. So behind him, you have Nick Vanette, who was a third-round pick in 2016, and then Dixon comes in from Carolina. So at the moment, the depth chart is Vanette, Dixon, Disley. Now, to be honest, I see by the start of the season, it's going to be exactly the opposite. How do you see it?
Really? I will tell you, to be quite honest with you, I don't know much about Disley. I've heard good things about him. I know people were pretty excited about him. I will tell you that my excitement came out of Dixon. I think that I was pretty happy that we brought in a veteran tight end. I think that they needed that. We couldn't just have all these kids out there on the field. Like, you needed kind of that solidifying presence there. Nick Vanette, though, I will tell you, he is a fan favorite. People enjoy Nick Vanette. He does things. He gets some great catches. But once again, I go back to Luke Wilson. He was the heir apparent. And now that he's gone, I really think they're going to kind of flounder a little bit. I think Disley could usurp Vanette if he has a great preseason. But it will all come down to how those preseason games go. I think Ed's going to be on the team no matter what. I mean, he'll be up there. He'll be, a good force for the Seahawks. But for Disley to overtake Vanette, because he's a name that everyone knows, they know what they can get out of him, the fans love him, then he's going to have that great, brilliant preseason.
It's going to happen. Trust me.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay. You tweet me. Abuse every week. I can take it. I'm thick-skinned.
It's like, wait, what did you say? Where's your kid? Where's your boy at?
Oh, my God. I'm digging a hole for myself, maybe. Okay, so let's go on to the O-line. And, my God, look, I didn't look up any stats. I didn't think I had to, to be honest. I think if you just look at Twitter and what everybody said is probably the worst O-line play that was in the league last year. And look, they've said that the same five guys will probably who finished the season will be the starters, and that's Brown, Pollock. How do you pronounce it? Posick. Britt. You bring on and Freedy, and as you said, you bring in the building DJ Fluker, free agent signing. So, mate, just inspire Seahawks fans about how good this line is going to be this year.
This line is going to be absolutely average. And you know what? That is going to be fantastic.
Yes.
If we can get them to an average O-line, look out. Because look what Russell Wilson did with the worst O-line in the league.
That's all he needs.
So you get him to 15th. Oh my God, look out. Like, the whole world's going to change. Listen, here's the interesting thing about it. If you look at last year, after they brought Dwayne Brown in, the O-line actually started to get better. And toward the end of the season, they were serviceable. Now, listen, there's no rose-colored glasses here, guys, because this line was a disaster. But they started to gel and get better. And to the great thing about Justin Britt, our center, who was not a center, they moved him 3 times before he finally was center. And now he's found his calling in being an NFL center. But he was never a guy he'd be like, oh, we're doing it, we're getting there. He wasn't a cheerleader. This year he is so jacked about this line, which makes me think they're going to be average. And I'm okay with that. Here's the thing. Dwayne Brown is fantastic. I can understand why I got tweets from so many Houston fans when he left. They were heartbroken, and now I get it. He has become a huge part of this team in a very short amount of time. He is definitely, without question, one of the leaders on the offense. The guy is amazing, and I'm going to sing his praises forever, and I'm so glad he's going to be a Seahawk for the rest of his career because he is a great, great player and a great leader. And then you go to Justin Britt, another fantastic leader. The question mark always kind of comes in the middle, and so we all know Jermaine Ifedi. I talked about Pete Carroll's projects. Jermaine Ifedi is one of his projects. He's like the girlfriend he can't let go. I'm telling you. And the thing of it is with Ifedi is that Pete Carroll's absolutely right. He has the potential to be a insanely good football player. The kid can't get out of his own way.
But it's a dirty word, though, isn't it? That's one of the dirtiest words in sport, isn't it? Potential.
Yep. Potential is awful. Yes, it's just awful. And the problem is that Ifedi knows it. He knows that he's the butt of the jokes of the offensive line. And I think that screws with him even more. Instead of using it like Tyler Lockett did, he lets it get into his head a little bit more. And Dwayne Brown has been working very hard with him. So fingers crossed, if he can even cut down half of his penalties, his pre-snap penalties, life will change for the Seahawks offensive line. But I still think he'll start. I still think he'll be there. Then we have DJ Fluker, and I already talked about DJ and how happy they are with him. If we can keep him healthy on the field, I think he'll be a huge help. There's a couple others, though, that they can now rotate in. George Fant. Now, George Fant is not a name anyone knows. He was a tight end. They changed him over his rookie year to an offensive lineman. He did not know how to play O-line. He was terrible. And then over the next offseason, he got really good, and they were so jacked. They're like, the game clicked for him. He understood it. He understood his role, what he was supposed to do. And one of the first practices last year had an injury. I think he tore his ACL, was out for the entire season. And he was devastated. The team was devastated because he was going to be one of their great new additions to the O-line. Well, he is back, and he now is Pete Carroll just says he's even better. I don't think he'll be a starter, but he would be a great rotational player. We have Reese Odiamba, who came in and out last year, so at least he has some experience. We'll see what happens. Jordan Roos and Isaiah Battle. We'll see what happens with them, but I think we get to median this year. I think they'll become a middle of the road O-line, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
I was just going to. You spoke a bit more about injuries there to some of the guys, and with all the injuries that happened to the running backs, has there ever been like a chat that you've heard about the strengths and conditioning people there? Like you do have to have that many running backs go down in the season is just there's bad luck, and then there's just bad management of players.
Right. You know, that was definitely some rumblings with, within some of the media. I don't know. To be totally honest with you, I don't know if they did some switching up there. With as many other changes that happened, it wouldn't have surprised me if they brought that up. But a lot of people really laid a lot of those injury blames to the O-line and how bad they were and how, the running backs were trying to find holes that weren't there and they would get injured doing it and that sort of thing. But it makes sense. If you're going to look from the ground up to fix something, which is what they keep insisting they've done, they've started from the ground up to fix the problems, you would have to look at those conditioning and strength coaches, especially when it's all in one group. But the whole entire team was injury bit last year. So we'll see.
It always helps if you get tackled after your line instead of behind it.
Yeah.
That probably helps you as a running back.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. Half a yard would be nice. I don't know, but yeah.
I think Alex Collins was pretty healthy all season, wasn't he? I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
That's a bit of a burn.
Man.
A bit of a burn.
That's a burn.
Let me give you a little side note on this. My son is a huge Seattle Seahawks fan and was singing Alex Collins' praises from the second he hit the field. Loved everything about him. And when the Seahawks got rid of him and he went to, I think he's with the Ravens, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
My son was devastated. He's like, that's going to be the biggest mistake they've made in years. So let me tell you how much he was like singing his own praises all last season. I told you so. And I let him do it because he was absolutely right. Alex Collins had a fantastic year, and I'm thrilled for him.
Mate, chest out.
He
doing the Mick Jagger strut, probably, your son around the house.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Oh, man. Let's have a look at the defense. So,
is there anything left?
Well...
Plenty left. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'll get on.
But we can't call on the Legion of Boom anymore. And really, the Legion of Boom is part of Seattle Seahawks and NFL history. And they definitely made their mark. But the Seahawks allowed 332 points last year. And that was the most in 7 seasons. And that Seattle defense that used to just shut people absolutely down.
Russell Wilson's good, but he's not that good.
No, he's not. So Earl Thomas, Bobby Wagner, and KJ Wright are all still there, and they're all still elite guys. So, the linebacker core actually is pretty good. It might be the best unit on the D. But let's start.
Oh, it is, without question.
Yeah. So let's start on the D line, and pass rush is a bit of a question, and look, let me start with so you've got Jaron Reed in the middle, who's pretty good. He's a good run stuffer,
good.
And you brought in Vikings defensive tackle Tom Johnson and also Barkevius Mingo from the Colts, so they'll be in the rotation. Obviously, Bennett's gone, but Frank Clark is, I feel like, he's very good, but I feel like he just kind of needs to take another step. And Dion Jordan, who you picked up out of Miami in the latter half of last year, he seems to be having a bit of a second wind, if you like. But it kind of feels like, Frank Clark kind of needs to take a step, and Dion Jordan, there kind of needs to be some more pass rush from somewhere.
You're absolutely right. Here's the thing, losing Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill the same year sucks. It just sucks. There's nothing you can, other word for it. We knew Michael Bennett would move on. He had his time in Seattle, and he just like he had his time in Tampa Bay. He does that. He's one of those players. I love Michael Bennett. I love everything about him. I love everything that he stands for. But he's just one of those players that, gets what he needs out of something and kind of moves on. I respect that. I have no problem with that in any way, shape, or form. But then to lose Cliff to a medical retirement, and once again, I'm just going to keep pounding on this. Thank God they quit playing football. I'm just so glad that they took their health more importantly. And so, to lose them both, gut punch.
Yeah.
There's just no other way to put it. I think, though, with the loss of that leadership, Frank Clark is going to step up the way everyone wants him to. He always had a safety net on the line. He always had, Cliff or Mike or whoever as, taking that lead role. It's his turn now. And I really think that he will step up and do that. I think he understands that's his job from what it sounds like. He really understands that it's his time and his position in his group, and he needs to bring that. But you're right. He won't be able to do that alone. So they've got to find pass rush out of the other side. That was the beauty of Averill and Bennett, is they would swarm from two sides. And so I think that that's really something that they need to work on. Dion Jordan, everyone's really excited about Dion Jordan, but he's hurt again, and he's been having these problems. They don't know that he'll be ready for the beginning of the season, but you're right. He was having a real resurgence in Seattle. He fit there. He liked the coaching style. All those problems that he had in the past, which if you read his story, it's crazy, everything that he has been through. So it was great to see him really finding his footing again. I hope that injuries don't prevent him from doing what we know that he can do. So I think that'll be really good. You're right. But Jaron Reed and Nazir Jones, those are the two names you really need to pay attention to. They were so much better than anyone paid attention to last year. They were guys who would come in and make serious disruptions. They are two fan favorites. People really expect a lot out of both of them. And then Tom Johnson, bringing in Tom Johnson from the Vikings was a huge step. And Vikings fans were not happy that he was gone. But let me tell you, Pete Carroll, once again, singing his praises. He's a big, meaty, beefy guy that is getting in everyone's way. And that's a good sign. Will it be the same? No. And I know we're going to talk about the secondary, and I know we're going to talk about Earl Thomas and all that other stuff. But at the same time, this is not the same team. You're absolutely right. Legion of Boom was one of the most important eras in Seattle's history, but the era is over. And so we need to find a new identity, a new existence. So can people expect the same? No, it's impossible. It's a different team. And yet there's so many fantastic players still there.
Oh, yeah. And, I forgot to mention Rasheem Green, who you said is having a really good camp. So, he might... Who knows? We'll see.
Might be, yeah. We have to see how he transitions. Really, especially with those rookies, you have to see how they transition to the NFL game, and that's hopefully what we'll get to see in these preseason games.
Yeah, he'll have a little bit of an opportunity, you'd think. So now linebacker is certainly a strength of this defense, and Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. Could they be the best linebacker duo in the entire league? It's possible.
I think so.
They'd have to be in the conversation. And of course, I mean, Shaquem Griffin is added to that, and look, we could lump the defensive backfield in and just talk about all the ones that are left, because I was going to talk about Shaquille Griffin, and his play, the elevation of his play, maybe made the loss of Richard Sherman a little bit easier to take.
Absolutely.
And certainly Earl Thomas. But what's going to be the makeup of that defensive backfield, do you think?
Well, you're absolutely right about Bobby and KJ. Wagner and Wright are just two. And I always say KJ Wright is one of the most underrated players in the league because he has Bobby Wagner there that takes so much of the spotlight, which he absolutely 1000% deserves. And why he was not defensive player of the year, that really irritated me like 2 years ago. So anyway, but KJ is fantastic. The other thing about KJ is he's a true leader in that locker room. And so he this is his last year of his contract. I would bet thousands and thousands of dollars that they will get him re-signed during the year. KJ Wright, I don't think is going anywhere. Then you can put in Barkevius Mingo. We have Shaquem Griffin, like I said, more of kind of a specialist player, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you put in then the cornerbacks. Shaquille Griffin, he had a rocky start to the beginning of last year and then really came into his own. Still made some rookie mistakes, still made a few errors here and there, but really impressed the team, the fans, the media, everyone. He is, we trust him, which is a big deal, because we didn't have to worry about the secondary for years. And so we really trusted him. The interesting thing, I think, that actually made the loss of Sherman a little easier was the fact that Byron Maxwell, then they re-signed him for another year. So they bought Byron in last year. Byron Maxwell was on our team for a long time, played across from Sherman, didn't always have the greatest of years. Unfortunately, he came in right after Brandon Browner, so we were used to a different type of player where he played, but did well, went and made a lot of money from another team, which is great, and then came back to Seattle. And he then, and was playing well. He knows the system. So when they brought him in after Sherman got hurt, that god-awful Thursday night lime green team where
that's what it was. It was a lime green.
I hope to God they burn those uniforms. It was so awful. That game was the most heartbreaking game for me. It was awful. But so when Sherman went out, they immediately brought Maxey back, and then everyone's like, oh, thank God. It was a name they knew and that knew the system. So I think that actually was, one of the things that cushioned that Sherman blow, losing Sherman a little bit there too. Also, though, we do have, the Earl situation. That one's a little tougher. Well, that is going to take a minute. But so then we also have Nico Thorpe, and then we have the rookie Trey Flowers, who has been a little hit or miss so far in camp, but we'll see how he does in these games too. Some people think he's going to actually be really pretty good. Others, they're not. They might take another year or so. So we'll have to see what happens with those cornerbacks. But then you get to the safety. It is an impossibility. I'm just going to keep saying this, to replace Cam Chancellor. It will never happen. People need to get over it. He was the enforcer. He was a singular player. There's no one that plays like him. That's just the way it is. It's like trying to replace Marshawn Lynch. It's not going to happen. Okay. But that doesn't mean that there still won't be good play in that position. Bradley McDougall. I don't know how we cannot sing his praises higher. He came in last year, did a fantastic job. He's looking fantastic in camp. I think that he's going to do exactly what we need from him. As for Earl Thomas, let me just say this about Earl Thomas. I absolutely 100% support what he is doing. I understand why he's doing it. If you look at the Seattle team, they lost 2 players to medical injuries last year. They'll never play another snap of football. And then the year or two before that, Ricardo Lockett almost died on the field from an injury. I understand the thought process of getting your money while you can. I am never going to argue that with a player, ever, ever, ever. If you watch this game regularly, you understand why. The only problem I have with what he's doing is the fact that he won't shut up. I just want him, hold out. Do what you got to do. I 100% support you, but this whole social media drama crap, that's got to go. That's all I have to say about Earl Thomas. I think he will end up being on the field for Seattle this year. I do not think he'll return next year, but I do think he ends up playing this year. I really, truly do. But in the meantime, we have to replace him. And so that's where all this hype around Tedrick Thompson is coming to. They call him T2. Some people love him. A lot of people like him. Some people don't like him at all. But supposedly he is very smart football-wise. He's not as fast as Earl Thomas, which would be a huge hit because Earl Thomas can literally run edge to edge in seconds. And but he's a smart football player, and he's really taking to the position. And Pete is literally giving him free reins to take that position over if Earl Thomas does not come back. So it could be real interesting. Let's just hope that no one gets hurt, because then the depth gets real scary after that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say because, we've got equally, what's the word I'm looking for? Equally sort of disastrous or public holdouts with Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's nothing being said. Like those guys they're just holding out. And it's just that.
There's nothing you can do.
No, yep. but Earl Thomas is, you're right. He's all over. He's all over. And
just shush. Just be quiet, Earl. We know you're upset. We get it. Just be quiet.
I know, because it just escalates. It just makes things nasty. I think that there's an acknowledgement in the NFL that these things happen. And so managements work through it. Agents and players work through it. But this sort of stuff can escalate that nastiness really quickly.
It can also divide a fan base as well.
Yeah.
You start putting people offside.
It's very annoying. Yeah. Let me tell you this. I mean, the thing with Earl Thomas that we have to remember, and one of the things that we love about him, and I'm trying to remind people of this, is he is an extremely passionate guy. We have to remember when he broke his leg, literally Cam Chancellor broke his leg. When Cam Chancellor broke his leg in that game I think it was 2 seasons ago now, his first reaction was to tweet that he was going to retire. That's what he does. He's a passionate, loud, he wears his heart on his sleeve kind of a guy. And so I don't know why we don't expect him to do that in this situation. I just wish that his agent, who tried to pick a fight on Twitter with the fans, I don't know what his agent was doing, but he needs to tell him to just sit and it will work its way out, So it's frustrating as a fan. And yet at the same time, I completely agree with what he's doing. So it's a little hard.
Now let's get down to business. It's business time. Right. So
yeah.
NFC West. Now the neighbors have gotten tougher and
Well, yeah. Well, the NFC West of 4 or 5 years ago, that's when you had the Seahawks and the Niners in the NFC Championship game. So, it was good, but the last 2 or 3 years have been quite scary. You're
True.
Right.
Yeah, look, I think all the teams in the NFC West have come up.
Oh.
What?
Really?
Oh, well, maybe not.
No, I wouldn't say the Cards.
No, maybe not the Cards.
No.
Okay. Well, 2. No. 2 of them.
Yeah, two of them have, yes.
Well, one definitely has, and the other one's building.
The other one's building.
Yeah.
The other one looks scary. And this is not this, and this is a Seahawks team that's the same but different, quite different.
Yep.
So, picking a record here or predicting how they're going to go is tough. I know, but what's your feel?
I've just shown AJ a number on a piece of paper. What are you going to say?
You did. All right. Well, I disagree with Ben Albright. I don't know if you guys know who Ben Albright is. He is a sports reporter when he was asked if who was going to get the first pick in the draft, he's like Seattle. I completely disagree.
Wow.
Yeah, he was like, and so I wrote him back. He was attacked, appropriately. But I will tell you, I wrote him a little message. I'm like, you just love picking a fan base and picking on him. He's like, yeah, it was Seattle's turn. But that's, he's a good egg. I really like him. But he's got a valid point. There are some issues there. I got you. But no, I don't think Seattle will be picking first in the draft next year. Russell Wilson will win 4 games all by himself, so that'll be fine. So I think I would not be surprised with this team. Here's the problem, guys, and I know you get this. Until you get through the first quarter, you have no idea how a team is going to do.
True.
So no one, even in the first quarter of last year, thought the Eagles would win the Super Bowl, and yet they did. And you have to get through those first, 4 games to really understand a team at all. If the Seahawks can get through the first 4 games, winning 2 of the 4, I think that they'll have a 9 or 10 win season. If they lose all 4, I'm going to pray for 8-8. But I'm okay with that. And I think that it has to do with the fact that we have so much youth. I think back to that 2012 season when we didn't know the Legion of Boom was a Legion of Boom. We didn't know, what Russell Wilson would do. He was a rookie. There was so many question marks in that team, and yet they still managed to do well. We have to see how the beginning of the season goes. But I can look at the schedule. I can see 9 wins if we play the way I know we can play and the run game takes off. There are a lot of people who even think that, more is possible. I don't know about that. And yet, as long as this team goes at least 500, I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to... Well, no, he's showing me what he wrote down. But you did originally write 9 and 7.
I wrote 9 and 7, and then you started to sort of, I don't like the way this is going, so I changed it to 8.
I see 9. I do see 9 win. At one point when I was looking at it, I could even see 10. And so there's a lot of people who think that Seattle's going to surprise people. Like I said, it's going to be after that first 4 games that really tells us what this team is made of.
True. Now, just to finish this off, one thing we've been asking guests this year is to nominate a locker room guy. So who do you think is the guy that's... And you can pick an offensive guy and a defensive guy if you like, but who do you think is the guy that's kind of in the locker room, the motivational guy, the glue, he's bringing everyone together and...
The guy that, players want to run through a wall for.
Yes, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, that guy was Cam Chancellor for years and years and years. And now that Cam has left, although he's spending a lot of time at training camp, which is making me happy. But so you have to go offense and defense here. And I think without question on defense, it's the linebackers. It's Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. Probably more Bobby at this point. He's been real vocal about taking over the leadership of that defense. He's happy to do it. The players love him. They trust him. He calls all the plays. I mean, they love Bobby Wagner. So without question, he and KJ is kind of more the silent, going to go sit next to a guy in a locker room and help get him out of the dumps kind of a guy too. I really feel like that is who they are as a team. But if I have to pick one, it would be Bobby. On offense, I really think that guy has become Dwayne Brown. And I know I keep talking about him, but they brought him in, and it's not Russell Wilson. Here's the thing. Russell Wilson is great. People love him. The wide receivers like him. He's great for being the face of the franchise, but he's the leader on the field when he has to be, but not necessarily in the locker room. I know he can be a little divisive in the locker room, but I think Dwayne Brown is that guy. He and Justin Britt, I think that they are the guys who can go to all these players and be like, dude, what's going on? Let's do this. Let's get through this, because he's had such an impact so quickly. And he's a great vet. He's just a great veteran.
Well, listen, Dana, it's been fantastic to chat to you, as it always is. And we thank you so much for your time. And people can follow you at Dana OG, and they can also check out Our Turf Football now, can't they, as well, at www.ourturffb.com, where they can find lots of great content, including stuff by yourself.
Absolutely. Yep, lots of great writers. Come check us out.
Perfect. Well, Thank you so much for your time. It's a great pleasure, as always, to chat.
Oh, I appreciate you guys. I know you had to work around my difficult summer schedule, so I greatly appreciate that so much. And I love coming on anytime. It's always a blast.
Summer schedule. That's what they're calling overseas trips and jaunts they go on.
A really long vacation. Exactly.
That's right.
Well deserved.
That's right.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, that was our Seattle Seahawks preview, G, and that was fantastic chatting to Dana. We were chatting to her for a little while after we hit stop on the recording there. She's great value.
Oh, mate, absolutely fantastic. And once again, it's just you sit here and you have questions, and really, I don't even know why we have to do it with people like Dana.
They evaporate. Yep, they evaporate. Just go, Russell Wilson, boom, sit back.
Because I had a couple of times I could feel that she wanted to start talking. I was like, hold on, I've written all this stuff down. For God's sake, let me get it out. I've done this work I've done. And really, we don't have to do it. Like you said, we just say, Russell Wilson, tell us about the running backs.
Yep.
Sorry about the size before the wide receivers and the running back talk. It was a bit like that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the running backs.
But that says it all, though. That says it all.
Yep.
Yeah, but look, that's why we ask guests like Dana on again and again, is because she really brings it. So thanks so much, Dana, for doing that, and hope you've enjoyed that Seattle Seahawks preview. So that's another one. Yeah, I did too. All right, well, G, on that note, we'll sign off. So
you get to bed, and
I
got stretches to do.
Oh, very good. So on behalf of G and myself, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.